This week I'm going to be talking about ancient Egyptian art, particularly Pharaonic art. That is art that depicts the Egyptian pharaohs. Um, in Egyptian Pharaonic art, there was a lot of religious symbolism, particularly the image of birds and bulls. Bulls were the symbol of two of the Egyptian goddesses, so whenever a bull is depicted in Pharaonic or any Egyptian art for that matter, historians and art experts constantly debate which goddess it represents, and usually there is little or no consensus about it. The other symbol, the bird, is the symbol of the Egyptian god Horus. Horus was the son of the two original Egyptian gods. He was said to be the one true ruler of Egypt. So whenever pharaohs were depicted in art, usually they had a bird standing behind their head or very close to their head to symbolize both protection and guidance and pretty much the divine right to rule over Egypt. Also, going back to the bull, pharaohs were also depicted in scenes with a bull smashing down a wall, showing that when they had conquests during warfare, it was the gods that were on their side, and it was because of a divine will that they won. But besides having the intangible support of the gods, the pharaohs themselves were said to embody the gods. And in art, that was shown through the pharaoh's perfected body. They were well-muscled, they had long limbs, they were portrayed in hieratic scale, which means that they were much larger than any of the other figures in the piece of art, which showed their importance and their divine nature. It's also interesting to note that their bottom halves were depicted in profile, while their torsos were fully frontal, their heads profile again, and their eyes were frontal. This was so that as much of the pharaoh's body could be shown to the viewer to show how perfected he was. It's also, the pharaoh also wore, or was depicted to wear, clothing. It was usually tight-fitting to show off his muscles, but he was definitely wearing a lot of clothing, such as the crown, the white crown and the red crown. The white crown symbolized rule over Upper Egypt, while the red crown symbolized rule over Lower Egypt. And even though most of the color has been lost from the artifacts that we have from ancient Egyptian art, the white crown and the red crown are discernible from each other, because the white crown, to put it in visual terms, looked like a long bowling pin, whereas the red crown had a cobra at the front and a long board at the back. Sometimes you would see pharaohs wearing both of the crowns at the same time to symbolize simultaneous rule over both Lower and Upper Egypt. In contrast, it's interesting to note that the people that the pharaoh was defeating, or his servants around him, wore little to no clothes, and in Egypt, if your amount of clothing was pretty much indicative of your social status. To further the pharaoh's status, it's with his enemies, he would often be depicted either directly standing on their bodies or holding a mace in one hand and the hair of his enemy in the other, about to smite his enemy. So with pieces that showed violent acts like this, these pieces served as a historical recording of warfare and pretty much just news to the people, and especially to the defeated countries or cities, that the pharaoh was all ruling and he was the rightful leader of the newly conquered land. So suffice to say, in ancient Egyptian art, it was all about showing that one had both the religious right and the political right to rule both Upper and Lower Egypt.